If you have ever watched someone mistake a paycheck for a scorecard, if you have ever seen a person confuse providing money with providing value, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel. Because what Steve Harvey did on his stage one afternoon in the fall of 2024 is going to remind you of something important. The most costly things in a home are never listed on a bank statement. There is a particular kind of arrogance that wears the face of generosity. It announces itself with numbers, square footage, income, account balances, and it mistakes those numbers for the whole story of a life. It says in 100 different ways across 1,000 ordinary moments, I provide, therefore I am owed. I pay, therefore I decide. I earn, therefore I matter more. On one October afternoon in Atlanta, a man said that quiet thing out loud in public, with a microphone nearby. His name was Richard Stanton. He was a successful commercial developer from Phoenix, Arizona, with a net worth he was not shy about referencing, and a confidence that arrived in a room approximately 30 seconds before he did. He had come to play a game show with his wife and family, and had no reason to believe the afternoon would be anything other than a pleasant and probably victorious outing. He had not accounted for Steve Harvey. What Steve said to Richard Stanton on that stage, quietly, directly, and with the unhurried authority of a man who knows exactly what he is doing, did not just stop the afternoon. It reframed it. It took a comment that Richard had delivered as a statement of fact and revealed it, in front of 500 people and eventually millions more, for what it actually was. A measurement of what Richard believed his wife was worth. And that number, as Steve made clear, was one of the most expensive miscalculations a man could make. Constance Stanton was 53 years old. She had grown up in Tucson, the daughter of a schoolteacher mother and a mechanic father who had raised 4 children on 2 modest incomes with the particular combination of resourcefulness and warmth that people who have learned to make things work tend to carry into everything they do. She had studied interior design at a state university, graduated near the top of her class, and spent the first 6 years of her professional life building a client base in Phoenix that was, by her late 20s, genuinely impressive. She had met Richard at a charity gala when she was 29 and he was 34. He had been immediately attracted to her intelligence, her taste, and her self-possession. She had been attracted to his ambition, his humor, and the quality of attention he paid her in those early years, the kind of focused, specific attention that makes a person feel not just seen but understood. They had married within 2 years. They had built what looked, from the outside and for a considerable time from the inside as well, like an excellent life. What had shifted was not dramatic. It rarely is in marriages of this particular kind. Richard's business had grown substantially in their second decade together. 3 major commercial developments, a regional profile that had expanded into a national one, the kind of professional acceleration that reshapes a person's sense of their own centrality to the story they are living. As the business grew, so did Richard's confidence in his own judgment. And as his confidence in his own judgment grew, so did the quiet, almost imperceptible reorganization of their marriage around the premise that his judgment was the one that mattered. Constance had stopped working when their first child was born and had not returned to her design career in the formal sense. What she had done instead was something that looked, to the casual observer and increasingly to Richard, like not working. She had designed and overseen the renovation of 3 of their properties, managed the household across 2 homes and 3 children, organized the social calendar that was essential to Richard's professional relationships, served as the primary parent through 2 school transitions, 1 significant adolescent mental health crisis, and her mother-in-law's 18-month decline and death. She had done all of this with the skill of someone whose training and instincts were precisely suited to the work, and she had done it without a salary, without a title, and without the specific kind of acknowledgement that professional work generates almost automatically simply by existing in a transactional economy. Richard was not an unkind man. He paid for things. He paid for a great many things, and he was aware of paying for them, and over time this awareness had calcified into something that functioned in his mind as a ledger, a running account of provision that he had begun, without fully examining the process, to treat as a claim. Not loudly, not cruelly, but persistently in the small daily texture of their marriage, in the way he spoke about decisions as his to make because he was the one who made them possible. Their son Brandon, 27, had organized the Family Feud application as a birthday gift for Constance. She had watched the show since the early 1990s and had always said she wanted to go on it. Brandon had noticed this the way attentive children notice the things their parents say they want and never quite arrange for themselves, and he had made it happen. Constance had been genuinely delighted. Richard had been enthusiastic in the way he was enthusiastic about most things associated with performance and competition, thoroughly and entirely on his own terms. Their daughter Melissa, 24, rounded out the team along with two of Constance's cousins, Tyra and Jerome. All four of them loved Constance with the uncomplicated, foundational devotion of people who have been held and known and supported by her for the entirety of their adult lives. All four of them had, at various points and in various registers, wished that someone would say out loud, in a room her husband was standing in, exactly what she was worth. The Stantons were matched against the Whitmore family from Nashville, 5 people with strong competitive instincts and a relaxed, collective ease that made them immediately likable to the studio audience. The contrast with the Stanton family's energy was subtle but present. The Whitmores moved through the pre-game segment as a lateral unit, joking across the line, building on each other's answers. The Stantons organized themselves without apparent discussion around Richard. Steve Harvey noticed it within the first few minutes. He always noticed it, the invisible architecture of a family, the way the weight in a group distributes itself, where the attention flows and who receives it and who directs it. He spent time with each Stanton family member during the introductions, asking questions, drawing people out. Constance was warm, quick, and funnier than Richard appeared to expect. Her answer to Steve's question about the most chaotic thing that had ever happened at one of their family dinners produced the biggest laugh of the pre-game segment and drew a response from the audience that was clearly audible as genuine. Richard, 2 people to her left, had laughed too. But the laugh had a particular quality, the laugh of a man who is pleased that his wife is performing well, in the way that a person is pleased when something they own performs as expected. Steve filed it. The game opened well for the Stantons. Richard was aggressive at the buzzer, first in, loud, confident, and he was right often enough that his aggression read as competence. Constance contributed 2 answers in the first round that were both top-ranked responses, and the audience responded each time with the warm, genuine applause that greets an unexpected high score. Brandon and Melissa were excellent. Tyra and Jerome held their own with good humor. The comment that changed the afternoon arrived during the second round, in the brief transition pause between 2 questions. Steve Harvey had been moving through a light exchange with the family, the kind of warm, improvisational conversation that he uses to keep the energy alive between segments. He had asked Constance, in the easy way he asks things when he is genuinely curious, whether she had a professional background, whether she had worked in a field before the family. Constance had begun to describe her interior design career, the training, the early clients, the work she had done on their properties. She spoke about it with the particular combination of precision and enthusiasm that belongs to people describing work they were genuinely good at. Before she had finished, Richard leaned slightly forward and said, in the expansive tone of a man contributing a clarifying detail, "She didn't need to keep working. I take care of all of that. Everything she has, she doesn't need to worry about any of it. I handle it." He said it with a smile. He said it with what he clearly experienced as pride. He said it in the voice of a man who believed he was paying his wife a compliment. The studio absorbed the comment with the specific, charged silence that follows something that has landed wrong without the person who said it having any awareness that it has landed at all. Constance's expression remained composed, in the way that the expressions of people who have heard a version of this sentence many times remain composed, not because it does not register, but because the registration has become so practiced that it no longer reaches the surface. Melissa, standing at the end of the family line, looked at her mother with an expression that had been accumulating for 24 years and had just found a specific, public, unavoidable occasion for its full expression. Brandon put his hand in his pocket. Steve Harvey looked at Richard Stanton with the attentive stillness of a man who has heard the sentence that just organized the entire afternoon. Steve did not respond immediately. He turned the conversation, smoothly and without visible transition, to the next question. The round continued. The Stantons held their lead. Richard remained at the buzzer, present and competitive, pleased with the family's performance and with his own role at the center of it. It was not until the commercial break that followed the second round that Steve made his move. He came back from the break, stood at center stage, and looked at Richard with the unhurried attention of a man who has been thinking carefully about what he wants to say and has arrived at it completely. "Richard," he said, "I want to come back to something you said a few minutes ago. You said that Constance doesn't need to work, that you take care of everything, that she doesn't need to worry because you handle it." Richard nodded, still comfortable, still inside the version of himself that understood the afternoon to be going well. "That's right," he said. "She has everything she needs. I hear you, Steve said, and I want to ask you something. He paused, and the pause was the kind that closes the exits. What does Constance pay for? Richard looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, what does she pay for? Steve repeated with complete evenness. Not with money, with her time, with her work. With her knowledge and her judgment and her presence. What does she contribute to the life you're describing, the one that you pay for? The audience, which had been tracking this exchange with the fixed attention of people who sense that they are watching something become something else, went completely still. Richard began to speak, to say that she raised the children, that she ran the household, that she was a great mother, and he appreciated everything she did. He said the words. They were not wrong words. But they had the quality of items being retrieved from a mental list rather than truths being discovered in the speaking of them, and the room could hear the difference. Steve let him finish. Then, how much would it cost you to replace what she does? The question hung in the air. What I mean, Steve continued, is this. You said I pay for everything. I want you to think about what everything actually includes. You've got 3 children who are grown and functioning and clearly love their mother. You've got properties that Constance designed and managed. I heard her describe the renovations. You've got a social life that supports your business relationships, and from what I can tell, she's the one who maintains it. You've had a mother through a health crisis. You've had a household running across 2 homes. What does a household manager cost? What does a professional designer cost? What does a counselor cost? What does a social coordinator cost? He paused. You paying for all of that? Richard Stanton had stopped nodding. He was looking at Steve Harvey with the expression of a man encountering, for the first time in a significant setting, an arithmetic that did not favor him. I'm not trying to embarrass you, Steve said. I want to be clear about that, but I'll tell you what I know from my own life and from standing on this stage for a long time. The most expensive things in a household do not come with invoices. They come with a person. A specific person who shows up every day and does work that the economy does not require her to invoice because it is done inside the privacy of a family. And when a man says I pay for everything, that man needs to ask himself very seriously whether he is describing a financial arrangement or whether he is describing a marriage, because those are not the same thing, and the woman standing next to him deserves to know which one he thinks he is in. The studio was completely silent for a long moment. Then the audience responded, not sharply, not explosively, but in the sustained, rising, full-chested way that a room responds when it has just heard something it already believed put into words it had not previously had. Steve turned to Constance. I want to ask you something directly. Do you feel paid for, or do you feel that you and your husband built something together? Constance looked at Steve. She looked at Richard. She took a breath. I feel, she said carefully, that we built something together, and I would like for that to be how we both describe it. It was not a speech. It was not a declaration. It was a sentence spoken by a woman who had been waiting, without quite knowing she was waiting, for a room in which she was allowed to say it. The audience received it with a warmth that filled the entire studio. Richard Stanton looked at his wife. He did not say anything immediately. When he did speak, what he said was quiet enough that the microphone almost did not catch it. You're right, he said. That's you're right. We built it together. Melissa put her hand over her mouth. Brandon exhaled. Tara and Jerome exchanged a glance that communicated 24 years of shared observation in approximately 1 second. The game resumed, and the Stantons won. They won with particular authority. Constance anchored the fast money round with 3 top-ranked answers, including the highest-scoring single answer of the afternoon, a response to a question about what makes a house feel like a home that she delivered with the quiet certainty of someone answering from experience rather than instinct. The audience received it with an ovation that went well beyond the score. The episode aired 6 weeks later. The clip of Steve's exchange with Richard, beginning with the question, what does Constance pay for? And ending with Richard's quiet acknowledgement, was viewed 21 million times within the first 72 hours of the episode's release. It traveled with particular speed through 2 distinct communities that do not typically share content at scale. Women in their 40s and 50s who recognized Constance's situation with the precision of personal experience, and men in their 40s and 50s who recognized Richard's comment with the discomfort of a person encountering their own reflection without having sought it. The responses from women were specific and numerous, and carried within them years of accumulated feeling about the particular invisibility of domestic and managerial labor performed inside a marriage by a person who does not receive a salary for it. They wrote about the ledger, the invisible running account that some husbands maintain, consciously or otherwise, of financial provision as the primary measure of marital contribution. They wrote about the experience of doing work that is consequential and skilled and constant, and having that work classified, in the daily grammar of a marriage, as something other than work. The responses from men were different in texture, but no less significant. Several that circulated widely were written with the specific candor of people who had watched the clip and recognized themselves in Richard's comment before they recognized themselves in Steve's correction, who had heard the words "I pay for everything" come out of their own mouths, in their own homes, and had understood for the first time, watching the clip, that those words were not a statement of provision, but a statement of accounting. A statement that assigned value in a way that diminished the person standing next to them. Steve Harvey discussed the exchange in a podcast interview recorded 8 weeks after the episode aired. He was characteristically direct about what had motivated him. "That comment, 'I pay for everything,' is one of the most dangerous sentences in a marriage," he said. "Not because the man who says it is a bad man. Richard Stanton is not a bad man. I could tell that from talking to him for 20 minutes. He loves his wife. He is proud of his family. But he had developed a habit of describing his marriage in terms that reduced his wife's contribution to something that existed inside his contribution, as though her work was a subset of his paying. And that is a misunderstanding so fundamental that it will eventually hollow out everything built on top of it, because the person whose labor is being misclassified will feel it even when they cannot name it. And Constance felt it. I could see it in her face before she said a word." He added something that was quoted extensively. "I asked Richard what it would cost to replace what Constance does, because I wanted him to do the math in real time in public, without the ability to defer the calculation. Because men like Richard, successful, intelligent, genuinely hardworking men, are often very good at the math that happens in a boardroom and very comfortable being imprecise about the math that happens in a home. I wanted to make that imprecision uncomfortable enough that he would stop and look at it. And he did." Constance gave a single interview, published in a home and lifestyle magazine 3 months after the episode aired. She spoke about her design career, about the work she had done on their properties, about the particular texture of doing skilled work inside a private domestic context rather than a professional one. She was thoughtful and generous, and declined to characterize Richard as anything other than a man in the process of understanding something he had previously not examined. "He is a good man," she said. "That is the honest answer, and it has always been the honest answer. What Steve Harvey did on that stage was not reveal a bad man. It was ask a good man to be more precise about something he had been imprecise about for a long time. And the precision, once it arrived, it was uncomfortable. But it was also, I think, a relief for both of us." She said something further that circulated widely beyond the magazine's readership. "I spent 20 years doing work I was trained for, work I was skilled at, work I would have charged a significant professional rate for if it had been done for a client, and I had agreed, without quite articulating the agreement, to have it described as something I did because Richard took care of everything else. That description was not accurate. And I had not pushed back on it as consistently as I should have, because pushing back on it felt like ingratitude. Steve Harvey pushed back on it for me, in front of 500 people, without making Richard a villain. I will be grateful for that for a long time." Richard Stanton was not interviewed for the magazine piece. He was, however, quoted in a brief follow-up item published by the same outlet 4 months later, in which he confirmed that he and Constance had been in couples counseling since the taping, and that the process had been, in his words, illuminating and overdue. He said that the question Steve Harvey had asked him, "What does she pay for?" had stayed with him since the afternoon it was asked, and that he had spent a significant amount of time since then trying to answer it honestly. "The honest answer," he said, "is more than I knew, substantially more than I knew, and knowing it changes the arithmetic of everything." Brandon, whose birthday gift to his mother had produced an afternoon none of them had anticipated, reflected on the experience in a message he sent to a group of college friends in the weeks after the episode aired, a message that one of those friends, with Brandon's permission, later shared publicly. He wrote that he had spent his whole life watching his mother hold everything together while his father held the checkbook, and that he had not had language for the imbalance until Steve Harvey provided it on a Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta in approximately 90 seconds of television. He wrote that he hoped, when he was married, to remember the question, "What does she pay for?" He wrote that he intended to be the kind of husband who knew the answer without having to be asked. Melissa said something shorter in a social media post published the day the episode aired, which captured more of the emotional weight of the afternoon than most of the longer commentaries that followed it. "My mom built everything in our family that can't be bought. Today someone finally said it where my dad could hear it. That's all. That's the whole thing." The post was shared 400,000 times. If this story made you think about the arithmetic that runs beneath a marriage, the work that never gets invoiced, and the people who do it anyway, hit that like button right now. And if you believe that the most valuable things in a home deserve to be named clearly and honored honestly, subscribe to this channel. We bring you stories like this one every single week. Stories about real marriages, real labor, and the moments when someone finally asks the question that needed to be asked. We will see you in the next one.